From the headquarters of Telesur English in Quito, Ecuador, I'm Carla Gonzalez, and this is From the South. The Russian President Vladimir Putin and China's Xi Jinping are in St. Petersburg to attend an international economic forum. The annual business meeting takes place on day 2 of the Chinese leader's 3-day state visit to Russia. After the meeting, Putin and Xi are expected to hold further talks during an unofficial dinner. On Wednesday, the two leaders signed a joint statement on the development of bilateral relations and partnership. Both sides also demonstrated what they called a friendship with a little panda diplomacy when Xi presented 2 pandas to Moscow's zoo. And at their meeting in Moscow on Wednesday, President Putin and Xi addressed a number of strategic international issues, including the political situation in Venezuela. Both leaders rejected any foreign interference in the country. Putin said he is working together with his Chinese counterpart to stabilize the situation in Venezuela. And both countries are deepening their partnership as they face growing tensions with the U.S. over trade policies that hurt both interests. Analysts say they believe that cooperation between Russia and China will help China offset some of the negative impacts of the trade war.
I think if we look right now, and especially in light of the ongoing trade wars between United States and China, then Russia appears actually a pretty reliable partner. And for instance, we could look at the oil sector, petrochemicals, and because of the land border that China and Russia shares, then Russia could be a pretty reliable partner for China and help China to offset some of the negative impacts of the trade war and some of the dangers of the supplies to China from other destinations.
Well, the visit certainly signifies the importance of Sino-Russia relations for both countries. We know the backdrop of this visit is escalation of the U.S.-China trade war, and the U.S. sanctions on Russia has not been suspended or mitigated at all. So this has created even more opportunities for China and Russia to come closer to each other, and also the significant need for them to seek each other's strategic support in this complex environment.
The Cuban government has rejected the strengthening of the U.S. economic blockade on Cuba, but said it will continue to work together with Russia to fight the unilateral sanctions. Let's take a look at more in this report.
During an official meeting at the Kremlin, Cuban and Russian authorities reviewed the fulfillment of bilateral agreements, and they confirmed their commitment to further cooperation.
These talks and the links we establish are of utmost importance to us. We are accomplishing the goals established by our leaders. We are intensifying and diversifying economic ties.
The Russian Deputy Prime Minister spoke about the need to strengthen cooperation to overcome unilateral sanctions imposed by the U.S.
I would like to point out how difficult Cuba's situation is at the moment, thanks to U.S. economy sanctions and to the pressure being exerted on the Venezuelan economy.
Before this meeting, the Vice President of Cuba's Ministers' Council spoke with the Russian Agriculture Minister about strengthening the island's food crop production with the help of equipment and products from Russia.
Esteemed Mr. Cabrizas, we are interested in exporting meat, grain and other produce to Cuba.
Cooperation in commerce as well as in the automotive, pharmaceutical, railway and high-tech industries are some of the goals of these meetings. But above all else, they serve to cement discontent with the U.S. aggressions against progressive governments in Latin America and the rest of the world.
Talks between Mexico and the United States on migration and tariffs are set to continue after a meeting on Wednesday failed to reach an agreement. Mexico's Foreign Minister Marcelo Ebrard and U.S. Vice President Mike Pence held discussions to try to ward off President Trump's proposed 5% tariffs on Mexican goods. The tariffs, which Trump claims are a punishment for Mexico's failure to stop the flow of Central American migrants into the U.S., are due to come into force on Monday and could increase by a further 5% each month until they reach 25% in October. Meanwhile, Mexico's foreign minister said the issue of tariffs was not discussed at Wednesday's meeting, but that the meeting focused on measures that Mexico will take to address the challenges at the border. He, however, said his delegation is hopeful that further talks on Thursday will produce positive results.
Well, today we don't discuss the tariffs, as a tariffs. The dialogue was focused on migration flows and what Mexico are doing or is proposing to the United States. Our concern about Central America situation right now. And so it's difficult to evaluate what the position of the Vice President or the Secretary of State is about the tariffs, because it wasn't, on this occasion, the main issue.
And heavily armed security forces on Wednesday blocked a caravan of Central American migrants moments after they crossed into Mexico from Guatemala. Migrant rights activists said the action by the security forces is an attempt to please the U.S. administration, which has repeatedly accused Mexico of not doing enough to stop the migrants from entering its territory. Many are asylum seekers fleeing violence and poverty in Honduras, Guatemala and El Salvador.
What are we going to do? We are going to suffer again in our country. We have no choice. They are killing us over there.
They told us that we're going to do all the paperwork, that they were going to give us asylum, but they just told us we won't get it, that we are being sent back to Honduras.
Meanwhile, in Mexico, hundreds of Mexican and Chinese companies have gathered at a joint trade fair in the capital, Mexico City.
I think the Trump factor doesn't bother the Chinese or the Mexicans in terms of their bilateral relationship, because Mexico is part of a treaty in the Pacific Basin.
Because the trade war between China and the U.S. would harm not only China but also U.S. and they would harm the whole world. And I think he is not doing the right things for the big picture, but only think about the Americans.
Brazil has closed 5 of its embassies in the Caribbean. Brazil's foreign ministry has confirmed the closure of consulates in the islands of Antigua and Barbuda, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Grenada, St. Kitts and Nevis, and Dominica. The diplomatic representations were set up during the tenure of former President Luis Ignacio Lula da Silva. There are also reports that Brazil is considering closing its embassies in at least 2 African countries, Sierra Leone and Liberia. Caribbean countries are increasingly feeling the economic impacts of climate change, with rising sea levels set to cost billions of dollars in damage. The Association of Caribbean States has pledged to tackle these effects. Let's take a look at what work the organization is doing to preserve Caribbean shorelines.
The countries in our region are facing a slow-moving but devastating disease called sea level rise and coastal erosion. We hope that the countries benefiting from this project will be able to present analysis of the impact of climate change on their beaches.
And to understand it properly, we would need a global data set to properly manage. And by supporting this project, we could have a better understanding what is happening in the region.
On World Environment Day, we spoke to Gary Aboud, a sustainability activist in Trinidad, about environmental concerns in the Caribbean.
One of the critical areas is hydrocarbon and heavy metal contamination of the marine food chain. We have a cancer plume here, and part of the reason why this problem is so great is because we have a lack of enforcement of existing legislation. Although our legislation is stronger than most of the Latino legislation, we also have a lack of independent enforcement, because oftentimes the environmental authority approves things by a rubber stamping process. Another problem is that we don't have the money to invest in sustainability, because our extractive sector, which is a multi-billion-dollar sector, we don't have any oversight of what value we obtain for what volume we extract. The whole global response to climate change has been made into a joke where it seems as, except for our young people who are having protests around the world now, the world still is in a denial stage of global warming and climate change, and we are feeling the first impact of it. We've had the most strongest hurricanes experienced in the history of the planet in the past 20 years, and two in the last year, both of which hit Dominica. So we are bracing, and we are not prepared.
Coming up, a unique alternative in Venezuela to boost production and fight off the U.S. blockade. Don't go away.
We are present at every event where our nations are staring. We believe in a new global vision, united in every broadcasting. We keep expanding our horizons and working on a closer and better communication. Now, in Grenada, Telesur, the news source from South America and the Caribbean.
Welcome back. Thousands of workers in Venezuela are taking part in a new initiative to boost production in the face of the U.S. economic blockade. One of these so-called productive workers' armies have been deployed in the Ministry of Tourism.
These men and women are part of the Productive Workers' Army. They say they're a non-conventional battalion fighting a non-conventional war. They were formed to restore Venezuela's productive capacity. This is the first battle in Caracas and the 14th in the country.
We have a very valuable people who are committed to this process and who are looking for a way to express that. And what a good way this is, this battle for the definitive independence of Venezuela.
After a thorough diagnosis, these workers are putting the machinery of the Ministry of Tourism back to work. There were electricity generators, refrigeration systems, cars and elevators that hadn't been working for 2 years. The work was done by volunteers.
There were elevators that has been damaged for 2 years and people were having a hard time. Now we can say that it is working at 100% for all the people who work here. So we can live with the satisfaction of a job well done.
More than 2,200 workers from different areas, ages and backgrounds are part of these productive armies in Venezuela, seen as a step towards socialism.
We are a social movement. We are a group of workers that give our labor and put the productive machinery back to work. As workers, we have gotten used to winning this war.
In 3 years, these armies have recovered at least 14 companies in the food, metal, gas and hydrocarbons industries. Their major achievement has been to overcome the economic and financial blockade that the government is suffering, restoring these companies with minimum waste and strengthening the working class with collective, permanent, comprehensive training.
In other news, the Senate in Colombia has agreed to promote a general who has been accused of overseeing extrajudicial executions between 2004 and 2006. By 64 votes to just 1, the Senate voted in favor of General Nicasio Martinez, the current head of the Colombian army. There has been a fierce debate in Colombia over the general in recent weeks after the New York Times published an investigation that showed he had been directly involved in the policy of murdering civilians and claiming they were guerrilla fighters killed in combat. Human rights groups say this policy is being revived by the current government. And some former fighters belonging to the Revolutionary Armed Forces of Colombia have taken up arms again due to the government's failure to respect the 2016 peace agreement. The FARC attributes the decision of dissident fighters to take up arms to violence against former combatants, a lack of economic opportunities, and stigmatization. President Iván Duque has repeatedly sought to alter the peace deal. Around 2,300 dissidents, former FARC combatants, are currently active, compared with 300 when the agreement was signed. The Peruvian President Martín Vizcarra has won a key vote of confidence in Congress, allowing him to push through his anti-corruption reforms. After a day and a half of debate, lawmakers voted by 77 to 44 in favor of the motion. Vizcarra had called the vote to force the parliament to back his reforms, which more than 80% of Peruvians backed in a referendum last December. The president had threatened to dissolve Congress if it voted against the motion. Parties of the left voted against.
The vote was to protect member seats in Congress. It turns its back on the country's reality because in Peru, what people want is the closure of Congress. Because it is discredited, because it shields the corrupt.
Ecuador's National Assembly has voted down a motion of censure against the former Foreign Minister María Fernanda Espinosa. She had defended herself by video conference since she is in New York at the current UN General Assembly president. She was accused of a breach of duties during her time as minister related to the security crisis on the northern border during 2018 and the granting of Ecuadorian citizenship to Julian Assange in 2017.
There is no evidence from the audit committee which supports the alleged failure to comply with the obligations which, according to the Constitution and the law, it was my duty to discharge during the insecure situation on our border with Colombia. It is publicly known that neither the President of the Republic nor the former Ministers of Defense and Interior, who were directly responsible for security in this case, have been called to face a vote of censure like this. It makes no sense to hold the Foreign Ministry responsible when it has no competence in this area.
Barbados will give up its majority ownership of the regional airline Liat and hand it back to Antigua and Barbuda. Prime Minister Mia Mottley made the announcement in Parliament on Tuesday evening, ending the weeks of speculation. Liat is owned by 11 Caribbean governments. Barbados is the largest single shareholder with a 49.9% stake in the airline. Mottley confirmed to the House that Barbados has accepted an offer from Prime Minister Gaston Brown to take up most of its majority stake.
We have accepted an offer from a sister Caribbean state, Antigua and Barbuda, we enter into negotiations with them to see whether a deal can be concluded with respect to Antigua and Barbuda taking up our shares in exchange for them taking up our responsibilities as a shareholder within the context of LIAT. This will require negotiations on the part of both countries, and therefore we will be writing Prime Minister Brown to indicate that just as he has established a negotiating team, the government of Barbados will establish a negotiating team that will meet with his negotiating team to settle the terms if we can.
We're taking one last break. When we come back, St. Lucia is ready to receive Carnival, and we have all the colorful celebrations and, of course, Calypso. Stay with us. Welcome back. The African Union has suspended Sudan's membership over violence against protesters. This at the death toll from repressive measures against protesters reaches 101 after 40 bodies were pulled from the River Nile. Following international condemnation, Sudan's ruling military council offered unconditional talks with protest leaders after it violently dispersed demonstrators on Monday. It also declared that agreements made with the opposition were void. An alliance of protesters and opposition groups rejected the military's call for talks and said the military could not be trusted. The spokesperson for the Sudanese Professionals Association, a body claiming a leading role in the protest, said the demonstrations for civilian rule will continue.
There is a lot of injustice. People are trying to take their rights by force. It has become an issue of murder or be murdered. This is an image replicated in the National Committee. It has become a matter of agendas. Omar al-Bashir left, but now there's Lieutenant General Burhan and General Mohammed Dagalo. Burhan will leave. That's first on the agenda. Then we will have to see what's second and third. Where are they going? Where will it end? What about our children? We started from wanting to change the regime. Now the regime is falling completely. So the military council must either respond to our demands or leave.
Denmark's general election has seen Social Democrat leader Mette Frederiksen elected as Prime Minister. She's the country's youngest ever leader. The final vote count showed that the opposition got 96 seats against 79 for the ruling Liberal Party. The country's former leader, Lars Løkke Rasmussen, has conceded defeat, saying he will resign later on Thursday. Following 2 decades of liberal economic reforms in Denmark, the vote marked a comeback for a social democratic party.
And you have chosen that Denmark should have a new government. Together we have created a hope that we can change Denmark, that we can improve Denmark. It is a great historic victory. The election has been about welfare, and the answer from the Danish people has been unequivocal. After tonight, we put welfare first again. Now, after the Danish people have spoken, the job is to try to create a new government. I'm convinced it will be possible because the support that you, the Danish people, have given a new majority, we cannot let it go to waste. We have the opportunity together to put Denmark on a new course.
And for our last story, St. Lucia has officially launched 3 months of summer festivities to mark its portrayal of Carnival 2019. Known for its spectacular costumes, stunning natural settings, music, and a packed calendar of activities, the climax of the annual St. Lucia Carnival features 2 days of street parades in July. Our correspondent in Castries, Alison Kentish, has more.
St. Lucia's biggest cultural festival, Carnival, is officially underway, and the stage is set for village carnivals, beauty pageants, calypso and soca monarch competitions, and costume band parties. The events are scheduled to take place at locations across the country, with the national activities and a 2-day street parade on July 15th and 16th set for the capital, Castries. St. Lucia's Carnival has its roots in both African and West Indian culture and is widely regarded as one of the most beautiful festivals, as the annual street parade is set against the backdrop of the Castries waterfront. This year's festivities have been officially unveiled, giving masqueraders and visitors a taste of what's to come for Carnival 2019. Reigning Calypso King T.C. Brown took to the stage at the opening concert with his popular tune which calls on society to appreciate the role of Rastafarians in the Afro-Caribbean art form of Calypso.
For writing, singing, organizing, we should be recognizing Rasta in Lucian Kaiso. Don't wait before it's too late. Demonstrate you appreciate Rasta in Lucian Kaiso.
St. Lucia's Carnival is known for its spectacular colors and stunning costume bands. For 2019, the carnival bands are displaying the country's rich arts and culture heritage.
The strong woman of Persia.
The official unveiling of Carnival 2019 also featured the beauties taking part in the various Carnival Queen pageants, local entertainers, and young talent. Carnival officials are promoting the summer festival in other Caribbean countries and say that the official opening was a sample of what's in store for Carnival enthusiasts, locals, and visitors over the next few weeks. Alison Kentish, Telesur, St. Lucia.
We'll be keeping an eye on that carnival. And with that, we end our news brief. But you can find these and more stories by checking our website, telesurenglish.net. And you can join us on social media. We're on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For Telesur English, I'm Carla Gonzalez. Thank you for watching.